Hello. Today I'm going to tie for you what I'm calling an articulated sculpin. Articulated in this case meaning two hooks, essentially two flies connected. I'm going to use a loop of heavy braid, but we'll talk more about that as we go. There are other ways to do it. The materials that I'm about to list are for the front fly or the front half of this streamer, and I'll explain why after I get through the list. I'm going to use a size 6 9231 as the front hook. Attached to that we'll have some dumbbell eyes. I'm going to use some olive marabou around the joint in this fly. Here's a piece of copper wire. We're going to use that to bind down the saddle hackle that we use for a rib like you do in a woolly bugger. There's a piece of that 30-pound braid that we'll use for the joint or to attach the two. Super bright cream dubbing for an underbody. And I have this barred strung neck hackle, but it's kind of webby and has some fuzzy stuff at the base that I can use. I'm going to add to this some Sili legs like they do on other flies like this. And of course deer hair to make the front end look like a sculpin. I'll use GSP 100 in white. As I get the thread started on the hook, let me give you some background here. So first and foremost, the back half of this fly is already done. It's essentially a woolly bugger. There was a period in time where we were tying olive woolly buggers by the dozens, and it was before I really got hooked on using a bead. So they're kind of plain, no bead on the front end, and just your basic olive woolly bugger. So that's going to be my back half of this fly. Like I said, I found a whole bin of them. I was way ahead on tying them, and I stopped using them anyways because there was no bead. So that's my back half. I was looking for a way to attach those, make use of them, get into this streamer game where they use the larger flies, the articulated flies, and maybe even at some point, entice larger trout. So here we are. So I'm about, I don't know, a third of the way back from the eye on the hook shank, adding in the dumbbell eyes with a bunch of cross wraps, and then we do a couple of those parachute wraps underneath and get that nice and tight. So, all right, before you yell at me, I'm going to leave those on top. I've done them both ways. Dumbbells on top, dumbbells on the bottom. In actual fishing conditions, I think they ride sideways, up and down. I'm jigging them and moving them all around, and they look as wounded or as anything. So I wasn't really trying to make the perfect right side up bug here. And I think at some point I added in a little picture, and you'll see there I'll try and point out some of the characteristics. But here we are. I think I made up my mind to put a few more wraps across those. I tend to do sets of 5 wraps in each direction, a couple of helicopter wraps or parachute wraps underneath. And they were the two bugs that I made for samples here. So the first one, I think the eyes are underneath. The second one, they're on top. They're very close to the center of gravity. They're not tungsten. They're not really big or really heavy. And I don't know that they'll consistently turn my fly right side up or upside down. So let's get that out of the way. And if you want to yell in the comments, I'm just going to apologize ahead of time and try not to be offended. So there's the bead. I forgot to show you. I use a metallic bead here. I'm going to get the braid tied down and then string on the bead and get the bead through the hole. I'm trying to do all this on camera, and I bumped the camera a few times, so I'll apologize for that ahead of time. I'll get the bead on. That bead is actually slipped on and still on there. Come up through the bottom of this fly. There's no upside down or right side up with the tail section, but I came up through the eye in this case. And I'll get that braid back through the bead and up there where I can tie it on. So here's my first little tip. If your vise supports this, I've seen everybody has their own method of attaching or holding that back fly out of the way. So we'll just get that set for length. Put another tight wrap or two on there, but here's what I'm showing you. It's a hair clip with a couple of gum bands, just cat's pawed together. I zoomed out so I can show you I just capture the hook and clip that on the main stem of the vise. Now, for those of you that don't have a thick stem there or shaft on the vise, I'm sure you can work out the details, but this works really well for me. So we'll drew everything up. I should have trimmed that braid off a little sooner, but it's about here I realized that I can get it out of the way. So the other thing you might not have, or you might have noticed, is that I didn't add in super glue yet. So I get through all this stuff and try and just super glue once, rather than adding some after each layer or whatever the case may be here. So we'll fold that braid back. I don't know. I put a lot of force on these. The trout aren't that big here. I think that if I catch the biggest one I can catch, and maybe even the steelhead up in Erie, I don't think they'll pull this loose. And if they do, it's still a good day. So if you can look, that's a spindly, woolly bugger on the back, just a little black head on it, couple of strands of flash sneaking out the back end with the Marabou. So there's nothing special about that. It had olive dubbing as an underbody, and then just like we're going to do with this front half, we're going to use some copper wire and use the rib from back to front to counter wrap the saddle hackle. So here I am with the super glue. Let's give this a good coat. We'll make sure it soaks in everywhere. Basically, the best case scenario is that this all acts as one unit, uses all the friction of the entire length of that shank of the hook to kind of keep those eyes from spinning. And we'll let that dry. First, got to move it around a little bit here just to make sure. All right, and zoom back out. Off camera, I wait a little bit, and the super glue is mostly dry. So here's another little trick. So everybody says, well, you just break your Marabou off with your fingernail, right? Well, my fingernails are dull and worn, and they get all caught up in there. So I've been using the back edge of the scissors, and it almost cuts them too clean, but in this case, it works well, and we'll get a nice little clump of those. Kind of wet them and get them back there, measure them for length. Okay, again, not being the brightest bulb in the chandelier here, I probably could have cut the excess out of the way sooner. But I got a couple of wraps and I like what it looks like, so I am going to stop here and trim off the waste. And again, if I'd make more than one of these before I start filming, I would look better than I probably really am. But like anything else, you get better as you go. So I'm going to wrap back to the end of the shank where the bend starts, spread out that Marabou a little bit. And there's my back half of the fly. The next thing I'm going to add in, now if you were tying this from scratch and you were making the back half, which like I said is essentially a woolly bugger, you would probably want this set of legs attached to that woolly bugger version and back half of this fly. But I'm going to add them in here. They don't add much to the shape of the fly in terms of making it look like a bait fish or something like that. But there's a little sparkle in there. There's some barring, and they definitely add a little bit of movement. So I've got 2 strands of that pinned down on each side. And now it's time for some dubbing. So I'm going to keep this thin. This doesn't have to be 100% perfect when you're dubbing up here. I don't think I want to make it too bulky. That's part of why the other reason I put those eyes on. I was taking up a lot of what I felt was the hook gap. So I just wanted to experiment with the eyes on top. And like I said, I've done a lot of single hook flies with the eyes either way. They spin, they rotate, they get caught in the current. pretty sure it's not going to matter much to a fish. Hopefully it looks a little wounded, a little off, something edible, and um, I don't know, catch my share of fish. Uh, maybe these, if I would true this up a little more or do what others do, maybe I'd catch a few more. So here we are, building a little taper. This is that fat belly going to show through on this fly. They have kind of a, Sculpins have a creamy brown, not always pearlescent, but like a creamy tan belly on them anyways. So there we go, we'll stop there. Put a half hitch in case I decide to do rotary or just to keep things from coming loose. And we'll hang that out of the way. So there's one of those webby, it said strung neck hackles, but neck saddled, it's long and, and this one is kind of tapered, but in this case it's about perfect. So I'm going to trim out the excess on the legs. I'm just cutting them to the about a hook shank, or actually a full hook in length, the front hook. That's about how long I made them. Seems about right. That's just enough to, based on the material, to let them move around a little bit. And now you can see a little bit of that fuzzy stuff at the bottom. I want to leave a little bit of that on there. And I'm going to do a little cross wrap front and back here to hold that hackle in. And then maybe a few more angled wraps just to make sure I have that hackle held in tight. I wanted to work my way back a little bit too. So I'm going to snip off the butt end of that hackle and get to wrapping. Yeah, not without throwing in another half hitch just for good measure. So I'm sorry about the long video here, but I don't know. There's, like I said, a couple of things in here somebody might not have seen in terms of trimming marabou with the back of the scissors like that against your thumb. Essentially, the rest of this people have done over and over and over again. So, but there was a little chat that went on in one of these videos, and they were talking about, some folks do this for their 15 minutes of fame. Look, my average, I don't know, views are about 100. So those of you that look at these, thank you. Never going to be monetized. I don't think this is ever. I'm never going to be a host on the Orvis podcast, so, or a host or of a podcast or a guest on the Orvis podcast, I should say. So this is just me doing what I like to do, which is tie flies, play with the computers and the video, and eventually catch a few fish. So I'm going to counter wrap, making sure I miss the point of the hook, keeping it nice and tight. And here we are getting up there behind the eye. So not without bumping the camera yet one more time. I put the camera a little higher this time. I was looking for a better angle on this, but I don't know. Blocked my view. It got in the way. I don't think I actually improved anything. So I'm going to get about 3 wraps over that copper wire. And I go to break it free here. And it wasn't going to break, so I thought if I just get one more tight wrap and pull good. And eventually it gives up. Alright, so at this point we have to get rid of the tip of the feather. So I'm just going to kind of saw through that so I make sure I leave a little stub sticking out beyond the wire. And I need a little room behind those eyes, so I'm going to pull everything back and throw a few more wraps on it. And I don't want to waste any of those fibers, so we'll try and push them all back. And then the other half of those rubber legs, they're going to go in next. I don't know, it's hard to see in the small version of this, but I think if this were blown up, you'd see there was a nice shiny fiber sticking out there where it shouldn't have been. One of Cheech's haters. Alright, so we'll get across there, get that where it needs to be. Then, if I take two to the far side and pin them down, and you have to resist the urge to pull tight right away or they come straight out like that. So I'm going to back off a little bit and then wrap tighter as I go forward. Now same thing here. I'll come back over those, bring them back. I catch a few fibers, but it won't be a big deal because we can pull it all back and put a couple of wraps on there to hold it, and we'll be in business again. I don't know, I'm pulling hard. I'm moving my whole vise around. The base is kind of big and heavy on the Renzetti, but so I've evened up some deer hair off camera, and I'm going to pull it out and trim it to length. So I want it to be as long as, I don't know, I probably made it a little bit too long. If I was being hypercritical of myself, I might have made that a little shorter, but I'm going to make it about as long as the hook, the front hook, and then I'm going to trim it what might be even with the front of the eyes, so that when I tie it down tight, it flares and it's done, and there's not much trimming needed after that for this section. So I'm going to pinch it on top, got a couple of wraps. That GSP is like perfect for doing this deer hair. You can slide it right through there. I got to be careful you don't cut the deer hair, but I get about 2 or 3 wraps in there, and I like the way that's going to look. All right, so I've looked it over. I'm going to move to the bottom and tie a section in there. So I've prepared another clump of deer hair, and I don't know, this is video, so you can get an idea of the size of the clump. I don't know how to describe it. Half a pencil. So I've made it about, it was probably about an inch long when I started. And I'm going to pull tight and work my way forward. Get about 3 wraps in there and spiral forward and get a couple of tight wraps in front of the eyes. Essentially move my thread up there, so when I add the last big chunk of deer hair, that's where it's going to go in. Alright, so we're looking good so far. Or at least to me. And here we are with our last chunk of hair, and I've combed it out and got it ready, and I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch stick back. I'm leaving the tips on this. I didn't invent that, someone else did. I'm going to spin it and work my way back. And that was a pretty good clump, and it keeps spinning a little longer than I thought it was going to, but it pulled in tight. Looks like I can push it all back. And I got my old trusty triangular shaped pen I got from some vendor back in the day, and it's perfect. It won't roll off my desk. And I use that for a 1/2 inch tool, 1/2 hitch tool, always say inch, 1/2 hitch tool, and to push deer hair back, packed deer hair. So you can see with that longer deer hair, I don't know, it made it a little easier to hold out of the way. I'll do a single 1/2 hitch. All right, so now everything's kind of locked in, and I'm going to do about 3 double 1/2 hitches. If I did 3 1/2 hitches, I guess that's almost a whip finish, but I'm going to settle for 3 doubles, put them behind the eye, pull it tight, and with a little head cement, nothing's going to come apart. I suppose if you're really concerned, you could have put a little head cement on the shank just as you were spinning this in, and that would help lock things in place too. I don't know, guys kind of frown on gluing hair in place, but So here you saw me sneak in and put my waste bin underneath. This stuff makes a mess. Um, so that's one of those dollar store box cutters or um, fancy knives there. I do hit it with a stone every time I use it, so I can kind of keep it going and sharpen it over and over again for a long time. I've been using that same knife for over a year. But all I really want to do is get a nice flat spot on the bottom. So here I'm going just above the hook, and I'm working my way up above the eyes. And again, saw a little bit. Doesn't quite cut as cleanly as a razor blade, but then um, my fingers stay healthier a lot longer with that, using that instead of razor blades. So here I'm just going to use my snips and finish flattening out from side to side on top. All right, so we like what you have there. Now, so there I'm coming from the hook eye to the dumbbell eyes that I put in on an angle. Hopefully you're seeing that. And it gives that head a real nice shape. Again, all subjective, no right, no wrong way. But I like the way these look. So now I'll come down there and I'll snip things off to help finish the flat. You notice I didn't go all the way back to where I had the rubber legs tied in. And I want to point that out because I like this look. I didn't do it on the my first effort here that I made that I showed in the video a while back, but I left that deer hair on each side, just a little fan of it that um, certainly to me looks like pectoral fins. So I tinker with it and trim it a little bit, but I don't know. The snipping and cutting actually went pretty fast here, but I really like that little wispy stuff that I left that looked like the pectoral fins. So I'm not sure. I don't think I saw other people do that on purpose. Um, Not to say I invented anything. I was talking about this in the comments too. I watch hours of this video. I mimic everything I see, whether I'm doing it consciously or otherwise. And in the end, I don't know, I make some flies that are just good enough to catch a few fish and keep me happy. And I spend a lot of time here at the bench and out of my wife's hair. Okay, so I'll brush that up a little bit. But other than snipping off a few crazy wild hairs here and a drop or two of head cement, which I don't think I caught on camera, um, this is my bug. And again, I've done, I don't know, a bunch of different stuff. I get inspired, I make something. I never do the same thing twice. Uh, but the ones I made before, I kind of copied off the experts, the Kelly Galloups of the world, the Charlie Cravens, Cheech. Those guys do a nice job at all this. I copied their stuff, made a bunch of them, fished with them, but I was, like I said, stumbled across all those extra woolly buggers and looking for a way to make them more productive or into something different, and here we are. So, but I don't know. If I was a fish, I'd eat that. All right, give it a nice trim. Now it really looks like a fin. Probably mostly to me. All right, there is one thing left. We have to trim those rubber legs to length. I'm going to end up chopping those off about the length of the collar. Like I said, I don't think those are actually part of a bait fish, but they'll move around, give the illusion of life, and I think that's what we're going for. So, a little primping, which I left in for effect. Zoom in, give you a better look. And there we are. That's this week's effort. Essentially, it's two woolly buggers, a deer hair collar, deer hair head, and some dumbbell eyes. But um, I don't know, stuff like this catches some big fish for some folks. I'm going to give it a shot. So I hope this helps you out. If you want to learn more about me, look me up on Amazon. And until next time, be safe.